All right, everybody, thank you for joining us for our Lunch and Learn series. Today we are going to be talking about the future of Avaya Analytics, and I will hand over to the team.
Thank you, Shelley. My name is Mike Tenery, and we have a team here that we're presenting and contributing today. And what we'd like to talk about is the future of AI analytics. And it's twofold. We will have an offering that we'll discuss that is coming from our product house and later this year as part of AXP. And then we also have a services offering that we'll outline and be able to discuss. It as the initial slide displays right here, we have options, 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 and we're talking about cloud native Azure, Power BI, and reporting tools. Now, what we're coming from is an ACES or professional services perspective. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I speak to my counterparts quite often. We've heard this from customers over the many years we've been around. If you can't report on it, it doesn't exist. We can have the best, coolest, most innovative solutions, but if a customer can't report on it to provide and show value to their superiors, it doesn't exist. And I think many of you who've been involved with contact centers agree with that statement. I've heard others quote that in presentations as well. So I'm glad it's proliferating and showing the importance of analytics and reporting and how it is integral to a contact center. Now, the next slide, we talk about our, I guess you could say, disclaimer. It's in every presentation that we do in the public, especially about forward-looking products. Go ahead to the next one, please, Brandon. Now, when we look at AXP analytics, this is what some have seen it engage. Our engineering and development, they presented this in a breakout session, and they also had a demonstration station at Engage. And we're providing what is AXP analytics, and it will be by the end of the calendar year part of AXP. At this point in time, it will not be offered separate as a separate service. So for example, for our AXP private or our AXP hybrid, at this point in time, there's no intention to do that, but we do have an answer. Go ahead and go to the next slide if you would. This is a sample representation. It is very applicable no matter what solution we're talking about that involves Power BI, is that we move from a data warehouse to a data lake to a data lake house. And as you can see in the arrow on the bottom, that is the natural progression is moving into a cloud analytics infrastructure. It just talks about the architecture and how it comes together. Now, for those of you who have seen the Engage presentation about AXP Analytics, this is just one of their dashboards. Very powerful, has a lot of information in here. It is multi-channel, as you can see right in the middle, the channel summary. Also gives you the total number of channels. So we're representing messaging, voice, chat, email, and metrics that surround each of those, and an agent breakdown and an agent summary. Now, one thing that I would say is that this looks just in presentation. This graphical representation is much like CMS Supervisor and the web client. While the data is very pertinent, it still has that look and feel, in my opinion, and I think others would agree. Go ahead to the next one. Now, that was the brief discussion about what AXP Analytics is. What is ACES doing? What if a customer already has an instance of Power BI? They own it. They deal with it. They're not proficient at it, but they have it. Well, ACEs can do an agile service that can assist with activating Azure Blob or Databricks, activate Microsoft Fabric, co-develop the flows in Fabric. We can consult with the client on the source data connections. For example, SFTP for CMS into the Azure Blob and to the Fabric. And that can also be assistance with Avaya and non-Avaya data sets. For example, if I wanted to bring in payroll information, and what I mean by that is cost. How much does a fully loaded agent average cost to the contact center be? And I could bring that in and twist that into the analytics of using the business intelligence tools. Very valuable. We can also assist with source to cloud data mapping. What do we mean by that? Well, simply think of an Excel spreadsheet. When I have an Excel spreadsheet, every cell or every column and row, I have to define what that is. What is the format? Is it a date? Is it data? Is it a currency? Is it this? Is it that? But that's what we have to do with that data that comes from the source. When we get it into the cloud, we have to define what that data is for each element. It sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but it's not brain surgery. It's just making sure that we do some of that data mapping and make sure that it's a very important step in the process, because when we get into using the Power BI tool for creating dashboards and visuals, we have to be able to have data integrity and make sure that we know exactly what we're drawing from so that our visuals are meaningful. Now, we are going with the agile process here. Throughout this whole process, we can also add sprints to assist in building custom visualizations. Now, that can be side by side as a true consulting and helping, or it can be the hands-on keyboard building it for the customer with their input and saying, is this what you want? Is this what you can use? And then finally, we can integrate Copilot into the integration if we want to. Now, the Copilot is going to be in the AXP analytics offering, but we can also do that as a one-off with a ACES engagement. And finally, a point to customers is that we can help them potentially retire Microsoft obligations, meaning it, like Avaya, we have a spend obligation every year with Microsoft. And if we're helping them customize a particular solution, in this case, building a Power BI front to end, we can help them with that, retire some of that spend. And finally, at the bottom, I talk about the contributors. We've kind of gone on with a skunkworks team from concept to input, and then we'd say our executive sponsors are that they keep us going and keep encouraging us are Gabe Rivero and Steve Meon. I want to thank everybody on this team because we've had a lot of fun doing this. We've worked hard, and to be honest with you, we've all become very much a close-knit team of disparate skill sets, and we've learned a lot from one another. The point that I'd like to make too is that we were able to take, with a trial instance of Azure with Power BI, Fabric, and the Blob, we were able to take that and then create the visuals, which Brandon has just put up. We were able to do this very quickly, at least the initial parts. We were able to get it up and working in 3.5 hours over 4 days. So we're continuing to iterate on this. And what I'd like to point out right off the bat, and I think Brandon, I'm going to hand it to him in a moment, is this is all ACD CMS data. It's all voice at this point in our renderings. And we've taken a lab CMS that has a DAD server that's generating ACD call information, just so you know what you're seeing as we go through the visualizations. And with that, Brandon, please show me your magic.
Thank you, Mike. Not sure if I'd call it magic, but we definitely want to emphasize that this was developed as a proof of concept, right? We wanted to show that a customer, a client wouldn't have to buy AXP to have this next gen reporting capability, that via professional services, that ACEs, that we could come alongside, and whether it was for one portion of the journey or whether it was for end-to-end activation of the data within CMS and other data sources, even non-Avaya data sources, that we could help. So we spun this up. This is an example, in the next few slides, continue with the example of kind of, for a lack of a better cliche, the art of the possible. Here, we're looking at some pretty simple, tried and true metrics, kind of boilerplate for what you'd expect. And we even went out of our way to include something that most individuals, most companies, most call centers might not want to report on, just to illustrate that you can, if it's important to your business, we have that flexibility. It's if you have a custom calculation, we can do it, right? There's so much flexibility here, and that's the value prop. Is if it might not matter to anyone else, but if it matters to you, we can do it. So we start in the upper left hand, and you see the average speed of answer, percent calls abandoned. You have calls answered in percentage and dial, calls within service level. You have breakdown of service level between total calls and then actual calls at the bottom in the yellow bars, where you are comparing total calls versus calls that were under a certain amount of duration, like filtering them down so they don't skew data. And what we're also visualizing here is calls by skill level. So again, this is DAD's data, but you can visualize volume of calls, and this can be utilized in multiple levels. Do you want to see skills by region, calls by region, by skill? You can just go all the way down the rabbit hole. And then we have, just like any other Power BI dashboard, you have cross-report drill down. So this page, involves a date slicer that slices all of the dynamic content attached to this. But then you can also visualize it, for those of you who aren't familiar with Power BI, you can visualize it next to static data sets. And this is bringing multiple sources of data all together in one place, and giving you these kind of insights. We can have automated pipelines on the back end, running refresh rates in a matter of minutes. Every few minutes we can have event-driven things. We are working on real time right now. We don't have it in a beta form, but that's the idea, right? This slide is the on-ramp for conceptually level setting on what we're trying to do and what we're trying to help customers. But it can get even more complex if we wanted to. For example, if you wanted to break down by skill and you wanted to do a little bit more of a more nuanced, a more detailed look, you can start using all of these disparate data sets to analyze and to track the things that matter to you in terms of skill level performance. So, you can apply the filters in the upper left-hand corner to see the performance of, comparing two skills against each other, drilling down to see which are the top performers, which are struggling. And these are all just examples of the kinds of visualizations you can do. These aren't the extent of what we can do. Again, these are just kind of conceptual amuse-bouches, little appetizers for what is possible, right? We will be able to come in and, based on any client's needs, as a professional service offering, we'll be able to consult and say, okay, here's the underlying data sets. Do you want us to build the pipelines? Do you want, and if you want to do it in-house, you can. If you just want us to be advisory, we can. Okay, let's brainstorm on ways that you can create a report, a dashboard, an application, publish it out, whether it's via PowerPoint like this and have the interactive capabilities, whether it's via an embedded web page. Let's make sure that you have full visibility into this thing we're doing, and let's make sure that it answers all of your questions, answers your leadership team's questions. So it's at any level, whether that manifests in a out of the box pre-built visualization from Power BI, all the way down to custom visualizations developed in any specific programming language that works for your environment. Whatever you would want to have us build it, or you build it and we advise. And it's so flexible.
Although,
This.
just to,
Oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the
no, go ahead.
interesting part is in these visualizations, our purpose is number one, let's bring data over that people are comfortable with, that they understand, that they can look at it at first glance and go, oh, I understand. I know what percent abandoned calls is. I know what skills are. I know what average speed of answer is. But then, as we'll see in the next rendering, let's look at it differently. Not only from a visual standpoint, but how do we look at the data differently? And I think that's Brandon's point.
Yeah, and that's it can be an engineering effort all the way out to how do we work with you? How do we consult to find new and creative ways to analyze, to visualize, and how to summarize what's going on in your call centers? Just to answer some of the questions in stride as we go. I'm not sure if the slide deck will be shared later on, but the video will be posted, and feel free to take screenshots. And then Robin, is the data from Avaya's own call center, or is it from a customer's? So it's actually synthetic data. It's all just simulated. It's a simulated call center that we ran for ease of use. There you go. Thank you, Kevin. But yeah,
couldn't type fast enough. Sorry.
No worries. I'm just sorry I came over you.
Go ahead and go to the next slide if you would, Brandon. And
Absolutely.
If you don't mind me doing prefacing on this, oh, that's interesting. There we go. Now, this is a very different view. We wanted to come up with something new. And I'm going to give you a little bit of, like I said, an introduction to this slide. When we brought the information over, traditionally folks think about, okay, I'll bring over the historical VDN skill and agent information. Very typical, very desirous. But we were also able to bring over agent trace information and the external call history, or ECH data. In this particular rendering, we took advantage of having that data together. And we actually came up with a new KPI called customer experience duration. And it's a very different view from what traditionally contact center management looks at. You'll see the displays of the categories there is pre-agent time, agent time, customer experience duration. What's that mean? Well, think about pre-agent time, as we call it. It may not be the final name, but what we're thinking of is taking advantage of ECH data. We're able to see as soon as a caller hits a trunk inbound to the enterprise, until which point it gets to a queue step and a vector. What is going on between that time? Now, as Brandon just stated, this is ACD information that is from a emulation of calls coming into a contact center, and the CMS, the lab CMS, is measuring that information. Well, it was very enlightening to us. We stumbled upon this by going, gosh, has anybody ever looked at the pre-information? We don't have an IVR here. We don't have any other technology that's included within this particular call flow. So very simply, it's, wow, this is the time that a customer spends before they even have the opportunity to be serviced by an agent. Traditionally, a contact center just looks at the point it hits the queue, and then we measure from there all the metrics. But what happens before they get there? So this is true customer journey information. My goodness, if I've got, for example, our first data that we assign data point or a call assigned to an agent, it's like, oh my gosh, 22% of the time, the calls that this agent serviced was spent before it even got to the queue step in the vector. What's going on? It gives us another analytical look and another point to go, what's going on? For example, we've got an airline customer that we dealt with last week that plays 50 seconds of FAA required announcements before they get it to an agent. Well, that's important to customer journey information, because now we are looking at what the customer experience is, not how the contact center is performing. So I'll just leave it there and let Brandon show you and hopefully wow you with some of the information that we've put together, and with the visualization and the unique thought process, at least in my world, that Brandon has come up with on the right-hand side, which I think is an extremely cool graphic, and he'll give you the technical names of how that aligns in a moment. So Brandon, wow them with your magic, buddy.
I don't know if I'll wow them, but I will definitely give them the technical names, whether they want it or not. So as Mike said, we were really just setting out to show various stages of progression, right? So we can talk about, hey, you want all of your data in one place, you want external call history, we can talk about that all day. We can talk about engineering efforts in terms of data engineering. We can talk about data pipelines, transformation, schema on request. We can talk about those things, but very few people care unless they see how it manifests. So these slides where we're showing these dashboards are, again, just meant to show from the most basic to an example of an edge case or an example of an emerging use case, how it could manifest. And as Mike said, with just the synthetic data that we have in only voice, we're able to bend it and see it from all these different dimensions and come up with this customer experience duration. That isn't just limited to this, right? So we can start ingesting duration in IVR. We can start ingesting these other touch points and segments of the customer journey. And we can start doing modeling off of that, any predictive analytics, right? Like the idea is you would still have access to the underlying data of any of these visuals, and you'd be able to export. You'd be able to create your own notebooks within the environment, create your own notebooks within the environment, right? So it's an idea of the back-end work that we're alluding to when we say, let's connect your tech stack in terms of CMS, maybe your like whatever you're using for a master data layer. Let's start running it through Microsoft Fabric. Let's connect it into that system, that what they would call a one lake, right? So a data lake centric, essentially OneDrive for data, SharePoint for data. We would connect it into that one lake. We build all these pipelines, and this is again an example of just how it manifests in the most simple of terms in visualizations. But you can do whatever you want with that data in Fabric itself. Fabric has a number of capabilities that it's ingesting from what has traditionally been Power BI, what has traditionally been Azure Data Factory. And it is from citizen developers, people who prefer to work in kind of basic SQL and low code and no code environments, leveraging tool sets like Power Query. It's friendly, providing data lineage, data governance, and access to things as simple as these visualizations, all the way to model building, PySpark notebooks, perfect for data nerds and data scientists like me, to where you can run your own experiments. The list goes on, right? So while this is how it manifests practically, this is just one dimension. This is just one slice of the pie, one layer of the value add of it, right? We're just trying to show you the ways that these efforts could manifest. Again, so to dive into this, this is a bipartite network. This is a bipartite network where the orange dots represent the log ID So, agent ID. Um, and then the kind of teal squares represent the individual calls. We then get to summarize both of those. And again, this can be laid out however you want. In the left-hand side, where you have all of the calls. Oh, geez. Where you have all of the calls together in one place. And I think I lost my slides. Do you guys have it?
No, we can't see it.
Okay, let me try one more time. That was weird.
And I'll try to answer George's
Good. Yeah.
question.
I was just going to say there's a great question there. You want to take a stab at it, Mike, or you want me to?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah. So the question for everybody is, how will the data reach the lake house? Is there data storage or is there a connector? And there's multiple ways to do that, right? What we've done is something simple under the KISS principle, where we just SFTP the files out, right, and then import them into Microsoft Fabric. So that's an option for existing customers. In the future, what the AXP Analytics is working on is they are engineering a connector that you would install on CMS, for example, and then it would push that data directly up into Fabric. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And you guys should be able to see the slides again.
Yep, yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of the behind the scenes, and it can vary. I think that's why we didn't want to espouse a one size fits all. This is how you will do it, right? Because if there are customers at every stage of their data activation and their virtualization journey, and we're just saying, hey, regardless of what it looks like on the back end, whether you currently have CMS data in the cloud or not, or whether you have AXP, we will come alongside of you, and we will help you get to this point. Get to the point to where you can have the flexibility of these visuals, have KPIs that matter to you, discover net new metrics, things along those lines, regardless of the method by which you get to that point. Although so Brandon, we do have preset metrics. Methods.
So Brandon, do you open up one of the agents? Just if you would.
Just to show kind of the relational data that we're examining here. Like I said, log ID is in orange, and then UCID is in teal. This is a bipartite network on the right-hand side, showing the relationships between each. You have these tables that summarize them. We can then even filter down to a specific agent and analyze them. So they're currently sized by customer experience duration. And then each of their calls, each call that those agents are associated with are provided here.
There you go.
I keep using my my scroller. So yeah, this each of these are the individual calls that you're seeing in teal out here, and we can do things. Okay.
Those are the UCIDs. Just to point out, this view than what anyone has seen from CMS or any other reporting tool that we've had from Avaya. If you see Brandon just clicked on an agent login ID. Now, obviously, we haven't brought over the names from like the CMS dictionary, and we could render that if we wanted to, but we haven't done it for the sake of expedience. But in this case, look, that is every call that the agent has taken and the UCID associated with each individual call, and metrics that we've come up with that we call the customer experience duration. But they're clickable. You could drill down. That's a very different view than what we've seen before. Being able, and that's where we take advantage of having that combination of both ECH data, or the external call history, and agent trace information. We're able to render a very different dimension of data.
Yeah, and to Robin, to answer your question, we're currently not utilizing uh, the distance between nodes as a representative of any metric. If anything, we would do something called edge weight, where we do which would impact the node's distance, right? It's essentially the strength of the connection, and we can set that to anything we want. This is kind of bare bones the concept, right? This is two relationships between two concepts, fairly straightforward. We can also do things like color by, let's say you have a sentiment analyzer that looks over the transcript of all of these calls and they're connected by UCID. And it gives you a percent satisfaction rate based on, the transcript and the sentiment analyzer. So you have CStat. You can then color by CStat to see what the average CStat rating is per agent, as in log ID, and then per call UCID. You can then filter down by those, and then we could set edge weight as in duration, to where the longer the call was, the thicker the line would be connecting your nodes and the closer they'd be together. So that's an example of how we could add dimensionality. We could even add additional layers of complexity to this by moving from a bipartite to a tripartite network, where we're looking at more than just kind of two concepts, but we're mapping three, right? What if we have multiple instances of CMS across geographic locations, and we want to link the geographies to the agents at those geographies, to the calls that came in our time frame, to the agents by geography. So that would be a tripartite network, and we could do clustering on, again, any of the underlying data. But that's just an example of how these efforts could manifest and how we could start reimagining the way we report on call center performance by having all the data in one place.
Well, thanks, Brandon. I hope, and we can open up the microphones if you guys want to talk, because that's really our last view, except for one more slide just saying we've got more lunch and learns coming, and please attend. Um, very different information provided in these. I know that Brandon and I linked our sessions from last week because he did a very formative session on data. And I learned a lot. I think many people did that attended the session. It is available on the via YouTube channel, but we do have some exciting sessions coming up. But going back to what we presented today, is there any other questions anybody wants to ask while we have a moment?
Hello, this is Jose Casasola. We, I don't know if you're familiar, but we have been working on an analytic solution that is doing currently just dialog flow analytics, and we were planning on doing, other components like some sort of similar to what you were saying earlier, to do and cover all the components more like a customer journey or an engagement visualization, if you will, which it shows the time spent on, Dialogflow or whoever is providing connectivity to Dialogflow, and then eventually going to pre-queue or queue, and then the time with the agent, CSAT, all of those things. That was the vision of it. We were initially working on getting everything on Dialog on Power BI, and eventually we hit a wall on cost, and having a standalone instance of Power BI and then having one of those per customer was actually quite expensive. And then we opted out of Power BI, went back to AXP, and started using the embedded MicroStrategy. And that's how we're working today. That's how the offer is done, and initial release is out there. And well, once we start doing that, we heard that the backend platform for analytics on AXP is going to be Power BI, which we were kind of excited about to go back there to Power BI. But mainly, the question I had is the vision from the architecture is different that what we have, in the sense that we are ingesting the data in Azure in a blob, and then we process it and we store it in an external database from MicroStrategy. It's not, I mean, it goes a little bit against what the overlook for Microsoft is looking like that they have a data lake or a one data lake, and they keep everything there together because in this scenario, the data is external. I don't know if this actually fits the model of the offer, not only for ACES, but for analytics overall. But I don't know if you have faced those questions, at least on the concept, on the, just in concept or on things that you were thinking of, because you were saying we could ingest things for other things like payroll or whatever, and that's exactly also what we were trying to do. So at some point, tie together data from the customer that they can ingest and make sense of merging or doing stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm
but
happy to take a stab at that.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know everything, but like just plain and simple. And what I do know is not perfect knowledge, but we have done some like pretty serious work in terms of testing theory and then practically working through what it could look like. Um, and what we're doing is we're saying wherever the data lies, we can pretty much call to it, right? So if it's in an Azure Blob Storage, what we are offering is, hey, let's go into whether it is in Avaya ACES managed uh, instance of Power BI,
Right.
or if it is a very specific, oh, let me correct myself, an Avaya ACES managed instance of Microsoft Fabric, not just Power BI. I want to make that distinction. Microsoft Fabric, that, or if it is in a customer native instance or tenant of Microsoft Fabric. What we're doing is we're building a number of data pipelines to create these kind of domain specific, use case specific, and we could do an overarching, but to just help with like a lack of duplication, we are ingesting the data we need from all these different sources via a number of different pipeline and data flow kind of solutions within Microsoft Fabric. And then those allow us to connect to things like, an Azure Blob, a Postgres, a Databricks, etc. So kind of regardless of source, we can query it and then make it live in that instance or tenant of Fabric, whether it is managed by, Avaya ACES internally, or whether that's managed by the client because they might have, their own and they don't want duplicative spend.
Yeah. And Jose, Brandon's right, because the reality is, talking to a customer earlier today that owns their own instance
Mhm.
of Power BI.
Yep.
And they're not interested in well, let's put it in more accurate terms. The strategy doesn't fit their strategy, where the analytics is going to live. So how do we as Avaya become flexible, helping our clients get to their end result and using the Power BI tool with all of the data that comes from Avaya solution? And that's where we have a twofold discussion here that we presented. Well, we can do it with what Avaya is going to have by the end of the year, or we can do an ACES offering to help them get to where they want to go with their own instance. Does that make sense to you?
It totally does. So, and that's one of the things that I was noticing on your offer for agile engagement with customers. Rather than us, so the thought process that we had initially is that the value that we would offer to the customer, and we would be charging them for is on the processing of the data. So we ingest the data, we generate the data, process it, everything, and we host the data already processed on a database. So then if you have all the data and all the data that you need for metrics, KPIs, whatever the case is already on the database, it will reduce or it will remove the dependency on the platform for anyone to use the solution. So we were thinking, okay, so we offer the solution on Power BI, we offer the solution on Microsoft, it doesn't matter. But if a customer, regardless of who the customer is or what BI platform they use, we can sell them the process data and the process, mechanism ingesting the data, all that magic, if you will, that is happening on the back end, remove that from the visualization layer. So keep it on the back end, and then they can use whatever platform or whatever BI platform they want. That was the original model as well, and that's one of the reasons why we were focused more on the processing of the data and generating the backend data than having, calculations or all those things on on the BI platform itself.
Yeah, and I think it's a balance because you're going
Mhm.
to have clients, you're going to have customers that want to jump into the visualizations that say, do whatever you need to do on the back end. I have to present this report every week.
Right.
But then you're going to have customers who say, I don't want Power BI. I don't want to use it. I don't like it. We use Tableau. We use, well, that's fine. Like let's set up an engagement. Let's have an agile process where we're starting to operationalize the ingestion of that data into something that's agnostic of business intelligence platform or technology, right? Let's run it into something and set it there for you, and you can query that, you can call to that, we can structure that for you. But it's kind of it's the full spectrum, right? Of
Mhm.
no matter where you are, we'd be happy to connect and see how we could enable you to get what you need done.
Yeah, and I think the main difference that I saw on that statement was that we can either help the customer set up the environment to do the onboarding for the data and how they process the data, but it's a one-time engagement, right? Oh, the model that we had, it was not that. The model that we had is that we will process your data permanently and we'll charge you for, the amount of interactions that you have hosted on the database. And we will do the heavy lifting for you because we will be doing all the processing, not necessarily uh, showing you how to do you do your processing and put it on your dashboard or on your BI tool. That's the main thing that I see. Like ultimately, we want to be on the same platform. We want to take advantage of the same implementation and offer that as an add-on, at least today. But if we have an option, at least if I was a customer, if I have an option that you get a one-time engagement to ingest my data, I pay you once and I can do whatever I want with the data. I'll all the time choose that option, right? So
Well, it is their data. They
it
own,
is the
they
data.
own it. And but the other point is we're trying to be extremely flexible because we have had conversations with customers that go, I need help getting the data out of your systems into ours, and
Mm-hmm.
we want to do what we want to do with it. And we're twisting up the data in many different ways and looking at it very differently with other disparate kind of data added to it. As I mentioned before, like payroll information. What's the
Mm-hmm.
fully loaded cost of an agent? How do I factor that into the performance statistics? Our tools today can't do that the way we're doing it with this. And we're pulling out Power BI because that's um, one of the interesting tools that we have an expertise in. But if we can help customers get to that point, because most of our larger customers already have BI tools, they just need help ingesting the data. In this case, the example of CMS. And again, the discussion we had this morning with the client, they were like, "This is cool. We need help." but we need help because we have our own data scientists. We need to learn how. Now, of course, like every instance, everybody wants everything for free. And we're like, no, you know, we have that knowledge in house. We have that knowledge in house, and it's a consulting gig. So therefore, you know, we'll help you. And I find it interesting that we would try to hold the data and then charge them for usage to access it. That's a little fascinating that we would position it that way. But you know, hey, that's okay. There's many different models that we can go after.
Yeah.
But I can tell you our big customers, they'd say, no, that's our data. We own it. You need to give us access to everything. Help us get it all connected up.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about when pushing the offer. And
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm. Yeah.
But let's you know, definitely have multiple offers in that sense, because they're going to do it. You know, our customers are going to do that anyway. If they want to go that route, why shouldn't we offer a service to help them if they want to go do it themselves? And and if we do a good job, which I anticipate that we do a good job helping them, they'll come back for more. And you're right, there's always that risk that it's one and done kind of consulting scenario. But if we do a good job and they like what we've done for them, they're going to come back and hopefully buy more consulting service from us to help them get with other things, especially as we come up with it. You know, our little example of coming up with new KPIs. Our legacy is a company going back to the Bell Lab days. Heck, many of the metrics that are used in contact center performance, we invented. We're the ones that set the industry standard for.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun to get back to that. And especially now that we've got so many new tools that offer customers very customizable and unique solutions. Wow, wouldn't it be cool if we come up with a new KPI so that they can measure the proficiency and the efficiency of using that new tool? And that's kind of our overlying strategy of where we're trying to go to and try to get to, is helping the customer, working collaboratively, and then helping them be able to say, gosh, that was not only from the solution set, but from a consulting point of view, they really helped us look at our business in a different way. So I like both strategies, and I promise you it'll fit customers.
Yeah.
It's just we got to be careful about one size fits all. And that's my opinion, of course. But I think we have a lot of people that think the same way. And I think you and I are on the same page as well.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you.
Great discussion. No, thank you. Great discussion. Anyone else? We have 5 more minutes. Well, then we can give you 5 minutes back. Thank you all for attending. I hope you found it useful. If you have any more questions, please don't hesitate in reaching out to us. And Shelly, thanks for giving our team the opportunity to show everybody what we've done.